Good afternoon. Well, yesterday in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial, it emerged that one of the accused, Bongani Ntanzi, made a confession after being detained in jail for 8 days without appearing in court. Under the Criminal Procedure Act, if you are arrested, you have to either appear in court the next day, or if it's the weekend, the next Monday. In this case, that didn't happen. That may turn out to have an impact on whether or not his confession is accepted in the case. Nthabiseng Dubazana is the director at Dubazana Attorneys Nthabiseng, good afternoon to you. If you're arrested, what rights do you have?
So the rights you have are that within 48 hours, you should have appeared in front of a magistrate. So, in other words, it affords the arresting officers an opportunity to, confirm your address and all of those things within the 48-hour ambit. And then you have the right to now appear in front of a magistrate in order for the charges to actually be put on you or at you. And then over and above that, you have the opportunity to apply for bail. If it happens that the matter comes before a magistrate before 48 hours, and your defense attorney makes the court aware of this, in actual fact, that arrest in itself is unconstitutional, and therefore the charges cannot go ahead. So in this particular matter, what may end up happening is that I think it's accused number 2, his charges in this entire matter may just fall away because his arrest was unconstitutional.
Does it apply to everyone? I mean, it doesn't matter what you're accused of or whether you're a South African or not.
Correct, 100%. It is for every arrested person in terms of Section 35 of the Constitution. That is why it is so imperative when the police officers arrest you, they need to read you out your rights. And the practice that we have seen is that instead of you as a suspected individual at the scene where you're being arrested, being read out your rights, you are first arrested, then you are detained, and only when you're about to appear in court do you get given what we call your rights sheet. It's a piece of paper with red and black writing about your rights and all of that. Only at that moment are your rights being read out to you. And mind you, you didn't know that anything that you are giving to the police officer up until that moment could be used against you. So what the courts have done is said that if the accused person or a suspected person gives out information without these rights being read out to them, that information also is deemed to be unconstitutional.
Okay, so quite a lot flows from this, to use a sort of vaguely legal phrase. If you are not treated properly by the police, if you're not told your rights, if you are held or detained against your will, and I suppose anyone being held in a cell is being held against their will for longer than the prescribed time, what are the consequences of that?
Consequences are that, one, you can have a legal suit against the state for unlawful detention and unlawful arrest. And if over and above that, it is not brought to the attention of the presiding officer that you were arrested and brought to the court outside of the 48-hour window, the likelihood of those charges even proceeding against you is very slim. The court may throw it out unless it's exceptional circumstances, which doesn't override your constitutional right in terms of Section 35 of the Constitution. So the likelihood of you actually being going through the entire process of the actual crime that you allegedly committed will fall away. And this is unfortunately what happens when defense attorneys pick this up and then they defend this situation in front of a presiding officer and then charges. The state has no choice but to remove or withdraw the charges against the accused because everything that has happened up until that moment is unconstitutional, which therefore flows that the matter itself being continued will be unconstitutional.
Surely the police officers themselves must know all of this, right? I mean, there can't be an excuse for them to just hold someone for 8 days because they feel like it.
Well, from what we've seen in practice when we're doing a lot of these criminal matters, I mean, coming from a background that I have wherein we worked in a government situation, we do realize that this is not taught to police officers. They don't understand the basics of what it is when you're supposed to arrest or detain a suspected person. I mean, I recall having to cross-examine a constable who had 20 years experience and didn't understand that the rights had to be read before he retrieved information from the accused person. And as a result, we got what we call well as 174, because this information that he used against our client didn't fall under the ambit of the Section 35. So it is really rare to find a police officer who understands that they have to read the rights to the suspect prior to the suspect doing any pointing out, them doing any confession, and anything that will result in them being, whatever information that they're giving, being held against them.
There's so many different elements to this, because, I mean, it happens all the time that people are arrested, basically their rights are ignored, they're abused, and we see case after case against the Ministry of Police where people win millions from them. I mean, I don't even want to know what that bill looks like.
It is insane, and it's getting the state, unfortunately, in a place where it's getting broke. And as such, when the Department of Justice and the Minister of Police is getting sued for millions, and successfully so, there is not sufficient funds to hire people who are actually going to prosecute, if it's going to be with the NPA, or have defense attorneys from legal aid and all of those things being paid. And as a result, we are finding ourselves at a disadvantage because we can't train enough people to deal with the different kinds of changes that we are seeing in the law. And I remember one recent case that has been decided in terms of suing the state for unlawful detention, I beg your pardon. And the presiding officer was very scathing in terms of how it is unacceptable that the police do not understand what has been tried time and time again. And maybe there should be a consideration wherein individual police officers are held to account in their personal capacity and not just the state as a body.
There must also be people who get arrested, and how do I put this, Dubazana, just disappear in the system. Their families can never find them.
Yes, it happens quite often, and what we have seen happen is that there was a lot of abuse that happened after the arrest. So somebody was beaten, was tortured in order to confess to whatever crime that they are being alleged that they have conducted, and they end up dying as a result of this. So instead of the state or the people who were responsible for this death, instead of them coming to the fray and saying, yes, this is what we did, they then concede, and then the accused person or the suspect never makes it out, and then they kind of disappear. And then if investigations are done and there's no cover-up, you'll be able to find out what happened. But usually there's such a lot of cover-up that happens that you never get to the truth of what happens.
What would it take to make the police behave better? I mean, you make the point about making police officers individually responsible. I wonder if maybe we could say station commanders of police officers. I mean, I remember, and it was Mada Masir was his name, who literally died in a prison cell. No one did anything for him in a police cell. I mean, there are plenty of other cases. I'm sure we could find them. There's got to be something, because, again, this happens. And, again, it's also IPID, isn't it? I mean, they seem to just fail, frankly.
I agree with you. IPID was put there in order to police the police. But what we are seeing is that either they're inundated with work, or there is some kind of situation where there's a cover-up. At the end of the day, people that work for IPID also form part of the SAPS at the end of the day. They are in the same kind of quorum, and maybe there is a cover-up that happens in that situation. So IPID doesn't work in the best manner, and when you do report a matter as a lay person or as a member of the society to IPID, it doesn't get as much attention as if it would have come from somebody who has money or in a high place, etc., etc. But I do believe that if at some stage the police officers that are responsible for the things that we see, especially wrongful arrest and wrongful detention, were to be sued in their personal capacity and not only the state, perhaps we might see a change in behavior on how the police actually conduct themselves when they're dealing with civilians.
If the police break the law in Ntabiseng, is there any reason for the rest of us to obey it?
I hope there's a good reason for us so that we don't go into a lawlessness state. I hope we can abide by it, but I'm hoping that at some stage there will be a lot more education that is brought to the police, not them just knowing the SAPS Act, but also understanding the criminal procedure in its entirety and all the other legislation that deals with crime in its whole. I feel like the training that is afforded to the police is quite limited. So if they had an understanding of the law itself, maybe we would see something different. So please don't break the law as yet. Let's see if there's hope for us all at the end of this thing.
Ntabiseng Dubazana, really appreciate the the time. Thank you. Director at Dubazana Attorneys.